Well, again, I'd just like to say a special welcome to those who are joining us from different parts of the world through the modern miracle of technology. And the Desert Fathers used to say that self-knowledge is a greater asset than the ability to work miracles. But certainly miracles and the miracle of modern technology is a wonderful asset, and it brings us together in this way for this Holy Week retreat. And sitting here in the Heritage Centre on Bere Island, we've just been introducing ourselves and discovering how rich and varied our backgrounds and places of residence and roots are. And I've been saying that on this very beautiful day on Bere Island, that the beauty of the island really speaks for itself, and I hope we can share something of that experience with those of you who are joining us maybe early morning or late at night during these coming days. And feel free to share with us from wherever you may be. If you have any thoughts or comments or questions that you'd like discussed or raised, feel free to email those. And Adriano, our Director of IT, who fortunately you won't be able to see during this retreat because he'll be behind the camera most of the time. We may reveal him at the end. He'll be able to gather these emails and we'll feel a connection with you in that way if you'd like to communicate with us by email. So we begin a very special kind of a journey today on Palm Sunday, beginning of Holy Week. And it's a journey that we are able to make at some depth because we give it the time and the attention to really allow the story that is the journey of this week to unfold. And it's a journey that, a story that we have heard or made many times perhaps, depending on your own journey of faith and depending on your age. And as we read the Passion narrative in the Bere Island Church this morning at Mass, it was a story that I'm sure everybody in the church had heard many times, and a journey that had, a story that had entered into the imagination, the dreams, the mythology of many of us. And that's a great grace, actually, a great gift, when a story like this becomes part of us and familiar to us, so that when we hear it again, it awakens something in us. We don't often know how deeply these stories enter into us and take up residence within our minds and our imagination. But then when we hear them again, we feel touched at levels of ourselves that we perhaps haven't even been aware of before. So in this week we're going to listen to the story on different aspects of the story, and we're going to reflect upon the way that story, the story of the last hours of Jesus, which is in effect what the story is, impact upon us and help us to be more aware of our own story and of the particular place that we are occupying at this moment. And the whole purpose of this story is to not really for us to look backwards in time, but to awaken to the present, to the deepest and most living power of the present moment, which is, of course, the presence of God. It's a story that, for many people in our world today, is a strange and an impenetrable story. Perhaps for many people it's similar to the experience of a code breaker who's confronted with a message written in code that seems just a chaos of impenetrable signals. Signals that don't seem to have any connection with each other or to hang together in any meaningful structure of meaning. We have a very beautiful little 6-month-old baby sitting behind the camera with her mother, Lucia, who is going to, I think so far, is going to be a very, very silent baby because she's enjoying the warmth of her mother. But when she makes a noise, it's sort of little grunts and groans, occasionally little screams maybe, but oh, there we are. Did you hear that? So perhaps only her mother and her father can really make any sense of those signals that she's sending out. But when we're confronted with the story of these last hours of the life of Jesus, we are in fact encountering a story and signals, details that have very profound and subtle meanings. The story itself is quite simple, but simple and powerful, but it's a story that emits a unified meaning, a unified message. For many, this story that we live through during Holy Week is incomprehensible. It's the story of one individual's life or the end of his life, and it's a story that if you put the 4 accounts of it from the 4 Gospels together, often seems a little inconsistent. There seem to be contradictions. We don't know whether, for example, exactly whether this story is the result of or the end of 1 year of public life, public ministry, public speaking, or 3 years. Depends, and the reason for that confusion is because of the deep symbolism with which the tellers of the story, the original tellers of the story, understood the details. They saw it in its symbolic meaning. They weren't writing newspaper reports or timesheets. So in some way the story is true because it's a mixture of history, of myth, and for some people it might seem to end with a happy ending, a wish fulfillment ending, the resurrection, which is not very realistic. So we're confronted with a very strong, demanding, and intriguing story. And if we give it time, if we give it attention, it will, I think certainly, share with us what it's about. And in doing so, we will be changed. We will not be the same. Can we decode it a little bit better this year by simply focusing and paying attention to what it is saying, rather than to perhaps our own filters, our own impatience? When we're confronted as modern readers with a story like this, I think we get impatient. We want a bottom line. We want a verdict. We want a decision or an opinion at the end of the story. And in fact, what the story does is to open us up to a much deeper level of truth. And at this level of truth, which is not just objective truth, at this level of truth, we will only get it, we'll only get the point, if we allow ourselves to participate in it. We begin to discover that truth is not just about objective analysis or our standing back and looking at something and coming to an evaluation of whether it's right or wrong or true or false. But at a deeper level, truth is about an experience in which we participate in reality, in the reality. And our meditation, therefore, is really a very powerful and almost necessary catalyst to help us to get to this point where we can read the story and understand it or be understood by it. Because our meditation is precisely about this shift in which we move from being observers to being participants. It's a very big step for us to really let go of our treasured objectivity and sort of detachment, scientific detachment, and actually admit that we connect with and belong to what is happening, that what we are looking at is something that we are also sharing in, and that we have to let go at certain times of this objectivity and slip into this deeper and purer experience of being with, of sharing, of participating. Now that sounds perhaps a little complicated and abstract, but what it actually is a description of simplification. When we do that, we become more simple. I mean, in the same way that children can enter into a story or enter into a game or enter into any situation really with full participation, fully present. They trust the experience and they feel one with the reality that they're in. That's why Jesus no doubt says that we must become like them if we are to enter the kingdom of heaven, which is a code word for the truth, for the presence of God, for this ultimate reality. So if we are to see the truth in this story during this week, we need to become a little more simple than we are. Now, those of you who meditate and know meditation as part of your life, that's a great gift, as you, I'm sure, would be the first to say. If you know what meditation is about, then you know that it does simplify you. I was teaching a course at a business school on meditation and leadership at the beginning of this year. And this was a group of second-year MBA students from many different backgrounds, some religious, some very not religious. But we approached meditation through the experience of it. I gave, a basic historical, cultural, religious context for meditation to show that meditation wasn't invented at Harvard Medical School in 1960, that it is part of our human story, perhaps the deepest power in our human story that can open up the common ground to us and connect us through all our different religions and different traditions. But then the real focus of the course really was on trying to make it as easy as possible for the participants, the students, to get into the practice of meditation and to make it part of their lives. That was my goal anyway. And I was, I must say, very happily surprised that they also made it their goal, and that from their different perspectives, just as we, I'm sure, here have a different perspective, each of us, a unique perspective, but from their different perspectives, they did this. They got into the practice, they took up the challenge of learning to meditate by making it part of their life twice a day, morning and evening, during the 6 weeks of the course, and I hope for the rest of their lives, but certainly for the 6 weeks of their course. And what was really very beautiful and moving to hear was how this experience was affecting them. Now, because they were coming at it from different angles, many of them spoke about it in different metaphors or different examples. They noticed the effect of meditation in their lives in different areas. A couple of them who were preparing for marriage, they seemed to be spending more time preparing for their marriage than studying. But they said that that their fiancés noticed a big difference in them after they'd begun to meditate. So much so that they began to meditate together. Others said, you know, I walk to class every day, and I've been doing it for the last year, but I've only just now begun to realize what a beautiful road I'm walking on, and what beautiful sights there are around me. And others said, well, one student said she had, she worked with a sort of little team project groups, and they would work quite late at night, quite intensely. And then she said, and I found myself asking people if they wanted a lift home. And she said, I suddenly realized I hadn't, you know, I had a car and I was going in a certain direction, and I hadn't even thought of doing that before. So generally what I think we saw happening, what they saw happening, was a growing level of awareness, of consciousness, becoming more aware and more conscious of who they were and the people they were with and the interactions. So during this week, the meditation is going to be a vital part of our journey and of our retelling of this story. And I think in this environment, this very beautiful and natural place, the meditation has a particular potential to lead us to a place of greater simplicity and to a place of greater awareness. And from that place, which is already within us, it isn't as if we have to force our way into that level of consciousness. It's already there. The peace that we want is already within us. The light we're looking for is already in our hearts. And the knowledge that we are seeking is already part of us. And the meditation, I think, will help us to simply see it, feel it, and realize that it is part of us as we are part of it. And from that experience, that's why the meditation is very central to the journey we're making this week. I think we will be able to come to this story with a deeper level of perception and appreciation. For any story, we need to hear and to listen. And that's quite hard in a visual culture like ours. In the YouTube and video world, or especially music video world, where images are flashed intensely and sometimes obsessively at us, where we seek knowledge through images, often more than through words. The idea of really listening to a story like this can seem a little old-fashioned even. Maybe we should do a PowerPoint. Maybe we should just show, the life of Jesus, done by some very good filmmaker. But actually, it's the listening to the story and the hearing of it that is going to bring about this deeper understanding. I was listening early one morning this week earlier to a radio program which I think was about famous beauty spots in England. I was listening to it on Radio 4. And it was totally absorbing. And it was only after 10 or 15 minutes of listening to it, I'm afraid I was doing something else at the same time, but brushing my teeth or something, that I realized what a strange experience it was, because the person narrating was using words and some audio recordings to describe a place. And although I couldn't see the place, wasn't television, and I didn't even have any, I wasn't even visually imagining it, but I felt a very strong sense of connection and presence to that place. And it was perhaps even more powerful than if I'd been watching a program on television about it, whatever it was, the Lake District or Cumbria or somewhere. So it's strange how listening can lead us to a level of spiritual vision, of spiritual knowledge. St. Augustine once said that hearing, the sense of hearing, is a quality of vision, that the deeper we listen, the more the eye of the heart is opened and we see. In a hyper-rational culture, also like ours, where, as I was saying, we value objective knowledge so highly, we want to measure things and deliver outcomes and measure the outcomes, and concerned about sustainability, everything is there to be measured and predicted. It's very hard for us in such a culture to appreciate paradox, what seems like contradiction to the rational mind. And paradox is that portal through which the truth is born. And sometimes the language we use about some of the things we'll be talking about and looking at this week can seem rather vague. We talk about the mystery of Christ, or the mystery of the cross, or the mystery of suffering, and the mystery, of course, of the resurrection. But in the actual experience of paradox, we accept that there are things that we cannot measure or define, and yet we come to know them. And we come to know them with a certainty and with a directness that cannot be gainsaid, cannot be denied. What happens when we enter into this level of knowing, through this kind of paradox, is that our usual ways of shaping and defining the world are changed, or actually become inadequate. We discover that there are things in heaven and on earth that are not dreamed of in our philosophies or our sciences, but which do at times break in on us like a burglar. They take us by surprise. If we knew at what hour the burglar was going to break into our house, then we would have been able to avoid it. But there are things in life and times in life where we are, in a sense, invaded, and our usual code keys are stolen. Our certainties are undermined, and we find that we are looking at the world and at ourselves in a different light. A great Christian mystic of the 5th century in Syria, Dionysius, spoke of God as a ray of darkness. All our formulas, our definitions, even all our beliefs, dogmas, and opinions need to be shaken up by this ray of light which seems to blind us. The English poet Henry Vaughan has a beautiful line or two lines. There is in God, some say, a deep but dazzling darkness. There is in God, some say, a deep but dazzling darkness. In the Easter story that we begin today, we will be struck, I hope, by this ray of darkness. It's a bit like a spaceship, you know, if you saw the film Gravity or many of those science fiction films or space films, where the spaceship enters into a field of, or shower of meteorites, or into the meteorite zone, and it pushes us off course. It pushes us out of our usual orbit, our predictable orbit of life. And we may be pushed then to the edge of experience, even to a sense that we are on the horizon. And that, of course, is impossible. We can never be on the horizon. The horizon is always ahead of us, or to the left or right or behind us. But there are times and ways of knowing and understanding, love is one of them, where we realize that we are actually, although our feet are on the ground and we're interacting with the real world, we are on the horizon of our consciousness. The first thing that becomes disrupted in this process is the sense of who I am, my usual sense of identity and self-definition. So I cannot take even myself for granted. And that could be a little scary. That might make us feel we're not just losing some of our familiar coordinates, but actually losing ourselves. And of course, that's very much one of the first things that we experience when we start to meditate. It's one of the reasons why meditation may be both attractive for us, and at the same time we resist it. We'll explore why that might be later in the week. But one of the first things that we have to be prepared for, if we want to make this journey, is to see and understand ourselves in a new way. This is what happened historically to the chosen people. The story that we are telling this week is part of a whole network of stories that make up the history of the Jewish people, as they lived in this experience of the ray of darkness through very turbulent and passionate times. What they were rather extraordinarily able to do, or destined to do, was to stay with the one reality, with God as one. That was from the beginning the intuition that hit them and knocked them out of the ordinary, pushed them into another orbit. They were surrounded by people, the pagans as they call them, who took an easier option, which was to live in a pagan universe with many gods. That's we break up the mystery into lots of little fragments. And but the Jewish people could not get away from this. I mean, they tried to, but they were always pulled back to this overwhelming experience of this ray of darkness of the one God. God is one, and there is no other. And this historical journey leads us this week to one of those people. We cannot understand Jesus without understanding him as a Jew. And historically, here is one individual person from this race that's so full of contradictions and paradoxes, who lived into this ray of darkness, this new way of seeing and being And he lived into it so fully that to see him is to see it. That he became and can be seen to be this dazzling darkness. This experience of being thrown off target, thrown off course, of having all our preconceptions and our comfortable assumptions shaken up or even turned upside down, this experience of dissolution is also ultimately an experience of death. But this experience also becomes one of recreation, of rebirth. We who follow and listen and slowly come to know what it means to love this person, to know him with that knowledge which is love, we are slowly learning through this experience of dissolution and recreation, of death and resurrection. It goes around and around. We're slowly learning to speak and understand the language that he gave us, the way of seeing that he gave us, the code that he gave us. But we can only break the code or break into the code by changing, by being changed. In the Gospel today, we began the story with the entry into Jerusalem. Let's just remember that briefly. They were now approaching Jerusalem, and when they reached the Mount of Olives, he sent 2 of his disciples with these instructions. Go to the village opposite, and as you enter, you will find there a colt which no one has yet ridden. Untie it and bring it here. If anyone asks, why are you doing that? Say, our master needs it, and we'll send it back here without delay. A very small detail of the organization of his group's logistics of travel. And the story that we'll be listening to will often be full of these intriguing details, which no doubt are connected to historical events passed on through eyewitnesses, through a living memory, but also which accumulate powerful symbolic meaning as they get passed on. So there's this combination of symbolism and fact. Anyway, the main point of the story I wanted to raise was simply the reception he got as he sat on this donkey and was carried into the city of Jerusalem. The people carpeted the road with their cloaks, while others spread branches which they had cut in the fields. Those who went ahead and the others who came behind shouted, Hosanna! Blessings on him who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessings on the coming kingdom of our father David. Hosanna in the heavens. And so he entered into Jerusalem and made his way to the temple. Well, this is acclamation. This is a politician's dream. This is winning the election. This is success. Everything that he should have wanted in terms of fulfilling his ambitions was now given to him. He had the crowd in his hand. And yet, we see Jesus completely unaffected by this acclamation by all of this success. We see the beginning of the great detachment, which we will witness more and more during the story in the coming week. That here we see him in the midst of events, in the midst of powerful experience, and yet remaining still, remaining centered, present, but uninfluenced by the negative or the, in this case, the very positive events. Not coldly detached, but centered in his own selfhood, his own reality. What we see here also is that the journey that we are making, the journey that he has made before us, and which he has opened up for us, is a journey that takes us beyond the immediate desires or the immediate attractions of the ego. The ego would be very gratified by having this kind of success. Could be this success at an academic level, at a financial level, at a political level, but even at an emotional or sexual level. It isn't about success, in other words. If Jesus had been distracted by this in any way, he wouldn't have been ready for the next test in the journey that he was making. He would have had to have gone back and started again. Just as we do in our meditation, often become distracted by the desires of the ego or just the fantasies of our minds or the anxieties of our feelings. So we are easily distracted. We see Jesus here making his way through this journey because he is not distracted. He is open to all the experience that is going to be put upon him, and he will have to process, but he's not distracted by it, either by fear or desire. So here is the model for us, for our, not only our daily lives, but in a real way for our meditation itself. To be open to what is happening, not denying it, not running away from it, but also not being distracted by either its attractions or its fears. We'll look tomorrow at how this story can only be fully understood if we place it in its full context, its full theological context, which means the full context of our human relationship to the mystery of God, to that ray of darkness. In our meditation, we are doing this work little by little, day by day, letting go of the pull of the distractions so that we can become free to penetrate more deeply into that center where we see Jesus firmly and powerfully grounded. We'll take our time of meditation now. So maybe just take a few moments to become comfortable. Those of you who are watching us or being with us on your computers can do the same. We just describe briefly the way of meditation that we follow. It's a way of great simplicity, but it isn't always easy. Meditation is often called in our tradition the prayer of the heart. And the heart is a symbol not just of feeling or emotion, but of the whole person. So we speak about speaking from the heart, or doing something from the heart, or giving our heart, or opening our heart. So this is really a symbol of that wholeness, that integrity, where body, mind and spirit, every aspect of our identity, of our ways of perception, everything we are comes together in a single place, in a single point that we call the heart or the center of our being. So this is the prayer of simplicity, because this place of the center of the heart is also a place of union. This is where we are one. That's why we feel life becomes more simple, more unified as we meditate. So first of all, let's begin with the bodily, physical aspect. That means taking a moment to get into a sitting position, a posture which enables you to sit still, but also upright. The basic rule is simply to sit with your back straight and to sit still. So it's helpful, of course, then to be comfortable so that you're not distracted by any pain or tension. So if you feel any tightness or tension, just take a moment to loosen it up and relax. If you're sitting on a chair, put your feet on the ground, your hands on your lap or on your knees. Relax your shoulders and relax the muscles of your face. Close your eyes lightly and just take a few moments to be aware of your breath. Just being aware of our breath can help to bring the body and the mind into a more harmonious relationship. It also makes us aware that we can take the attention off our thoughts. We're not trying any technique of breathing, we're just being aware of our breathing. And in this art of prayer that we call meditation, the discipline is to lay aside your thoughts. As thoughts, images, worries, plans, fears, daydreams come into your mind, let's call all of those thoughts, we just lay them aside as they arise. So we don't fight our thoughts, our distractions. We don't waste any energy trying to repress them. But we do faithfully and consistently lay them aside. And to help us to do this, we follow a very simple discipline from this tradition of prayer. We take a single word or a short phrase and we repeat it, the same word, continuously in our mind and heart during the time of the meditation. Choosing the word is important because we want to stay with the same word all the way through the meditation and keep returning to it even when we get distracted. So don't be worried about being distracted. Don't feel that it's a failure. If you feel you're no good at this or you're failing, just treat that thought as another distraction. And then there's nothing can stop you from learning to meditate. But if you get distracted by the idea of failure, or you begin to get depressed by your feeling of failure, then that will drag you down. So just when the feeling I'm not doing this very well, I'm not meditating well, I'm so distracted, when that thought comes to you, just say that's another distraction. I go back to my mantra, to my word. So that's an art. It's a very simple art, but it is one that is able to lead us to this place of simplicity. Choosing the word then, the word I would recommend is the word Maranatha. It's the oldest Christian prayer. It's in the language that Jesus spoke. It means, "Come, Lord." We're not thinking about the meaning of the word as we're saying it, so we're not saying it as an invocation, but we're saying it in simple faith to allow the word and our attention to the word to lead us from the mind to the heart as we lay aside our thoughts. So if you choose this word, Maranatha, say it as 4 syllables, Ma-ra-na-tha. Ma-ra-na-tha. Don't visualize the word, but listen to it, hear it, give it your attention. Say it faithfully, keep returning to it. Say it gently, without force, and say it attentively, giving your attention to the word, not to any thoughts. And above all, say it simply, without evaluating or analyzing yourself. So take a moment to sit still, with your back straight, close your eyes lightly, and begin to say your word. Maranatha, Ma-ra-na-tha, Ma-ra-na-tha. So let's end with this story from the Gospel of Mark. Jesus was at Bethany in the house of Simon the leper. As he sat at table, a woman came in carrying a small bottle of very costly perfume, oil of pure nard. She broke it open and poured the oil over his head. Some of those present said to one another angrily, "Why this waste? The perfume might have been sold for 30 pounds and the money given to the poor." And they turned upon her with fury. But Jesus said, "Leave her alone. Why must you make trouble for her? It is a fine thing she has done for me. She has done what lay in her power. She anticipates with anointing my body for burial. I tell you this, wherever in all the world the gospel is proclaimed, what she has done will be told as her memorial." So this story is one of those stories that lead us immediately into the Holy Week narratives. And the story I leave you with this evening to ponder, to turn over. One of the things that reminds us of is the role of women in this story. Although they don't speak very much, they are the ones who seem to get the meaning of the story better than the men in the story. And the mystical symbolism of this story is also very rich. The anointing with oil, the anticipation and the preparation for the the closing event of the story. And also as another account of the story tells us, the perfume, the scent of this perfume filled the whole house. So it was an action that had great repercussions and influence. As he tells us, it will be told and retold wherever this story is told, and for as long as it is told. And it reminds us again, I think, of how we are invited to receive the perfume of the gospel into our hearts, to allow ourselves to be anointed by it and to be changed by it.